The planet of Zorith was a place of beauty and mystery, a world where humans and aliens coexisted, but under fragile peace. Tensions often simmered beneath the surface, with cultural boundaries keeping the different species apart. It was here, on this strange and distant world, that a human diplomat named Lucas was sent on a crucial mission to negotiate a treaty between the many different species. He had been trained for years in the art of diplomacy, but nothing could have prepared him for the encounter he was about to have. Lucas had heard rumors about a mysterious alien woman, a figure who was both feared and revered by many. Her name was Kira, and she was the last of her kind, a race whose very existence was tied to a forbidden and ancient curse. Kira's species was one of the most powerful in the galaxy, capable of great feats, but their power came with a price. It was said that the act of touching another being, especially a human, could lead to destruction. For this reason, Kira had been isolated from the world, kept apart in a palace where she was never allowed to be touched. Despite the warnings, Lucas was curious about her, driven by the hope that meeting Kira could help him achieve peace between their people. He arrived at her palace one evening, where tall, silver-tipped towers glistened under the setting sun. There, in a room filled with strange symbols and alien technology, he finally met Kira. She was unlike anyone Lucas had ever seen. Her skin had a soft, pale blue hue, and her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the light like two bright stars. She stood in silence, regal and poised, but there was something in her gaze that seemed to draw him in. For a moment, Lucas simply stared, entranced by the calm yet powerful aura surrounding her. "Human." Kira's voice broke the silence, her tone as smooth as silk. "I know why you're here, but you should leave. This meeting is not meant to be." Lucas shook his head, feeling a strange pull towards her. "I'm here to make peace, Kira. I'm not like the others. I won't harm you." Her expression hardened, and she took a step back, her eyes narrowing. "You cannot understand," she said, her voice tinged with a mix of sadness and warning. "My people's curse is not one that can be broken." Despite her warnings, Lucas felt a surge of compassion for her. He stepped closer, trying to make her see his sincerity. But as he did, something strange happened. His hand brushed against her arm, just a small, accidental touch. It should have been nothing, but the moment their skin made contact, something shifted in the air. A jolt of energy shot through Lucas, making him stumble backward in surprise. Kira gasped, her body stiffening as if she had been struck. For a moment, there was nothing but silence between them. Then, a strange hum filled the room, and Kira's eyes began to glow brighter, her skin rippling with an invisible force. Lucas watched, his heart pounding, realizing that he had just crossed a line that could have devastating consequences. I didn't mean to," Lucas said, his voice shaky. "Are you all right?" Kira's face turned pale, and she backed away, shaking her head. "You have no idea what you've done," she whispered, her voice trembling. This was never meant to happen. The room seemed to grow colder, and Lucas felt a heavy weight settle over him. He had touched her. He had touched the forbidden. Lucas stood frozen, his mind racing as he tried to comprehend what had just happened. The energy that had surged through them was unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was as though the very air around them had shifted, charged with an invisible force. Kira's face was pale, her eyes wide with shock. She backed away from him, clearly shaken, her body trembling as if fighting against the overwhelming energy that now seemed to pulse through her veins. What's happening?" Lucas asked, his voice trembling with uncertainty. Kira took a deep breath, her fingers pressing against her temples as if trying to steady herself. "You shouldn't have touched me," she said, her voice strained. "My people, we are forbidden to make contact with others. It's the curse of our kind." Lucas felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He hadn't meant to cause any harm. In fact, he hadn't even realized that something so simple as a touch could have such an effect on someone. His hand had brushed her arm out of concern, nothing more. But now, in the silence that followed, he could see the panic in her eyes. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, taking a step forward. "I didn't mean to." "No." Kira cut him off, her voice sharp and full of fear. She took another step back, her breath quickening. "You don't understand. Touching me. It's forbidden. It releases a power that cannot be controlled." The energy in the room began to grow, crackling in the air like a storm building on the horizon. Lucas could feel it, a tangible force that seemed to press against him from all sides. He could see the faint glow in Kira's eyes growing brighter, her skin shimmering with a strange, unnatural light. Suddenly, without warning, Kira let out a loud cry, and the air around her seemed to explode with energy. Lucas staggered back as a shockwave of power rushed outward, knocking over objects in the room. The walls themselves seemed to tremble under the force of it. Kira collapsed to her knees, her body shaking violently. "Please," Kira gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know what you've done." Lucas rushed to her side, instinctively reaching out to help her, but the moment his hand got too close, another pulse of energy shot through the air, sending him stumbling backward once again. He felt as though he had been struck by lightning. His entire body tingled from the force of the energy, and he could hear his heart pounding in his chest. I can't control it," Kira whispered, her voice filled with regret. "This power, this curse, it overwhelms me. And now it has you too." Lucas felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had only meant to help, to understand. But now he had unwittingly become a part of something much larger than himself. The alien woman, Kira, was in agony, caught between the ancient curse of her people and the unexpected touch that had broken the rules. "What do we do now?" Lucas asked, his voice filled with concern. Kira's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no fear in them, only a deep sadness. "I don't know," she said softly. "But I can't let you leave until we figure this out, for both our sakes." The tension in the air lingered, thick and heavy. It was clear that this was only the beginning of something far more complicated than either of them had ever anticipated. Lucas sat down slowly across from Kira, his mind still spinning. He had never expected a simple touch to have such consequences. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the energy still lingering in the air. Kira had calmed slightly, though her eyes still glowed faintly. She looked at him with a mix of curiosity and regret, as if she was trying to make sense of the strange bond they had just created. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Lucas didn't know what to say. How could he apologize for something so out of his control? Kira, too, seemed lost in thought, her fingers brushing lightly over the place where they had touched. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Lucas finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was soft, filled with regret. I didn't know it would do this." Kira looked at him then, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something other than fear in her eyes. It was a look of understanding, mixed with something deeper, something unspoken. She looked down at her hands, which were still trembling slightly from the energy that had surged through her. "You didn't hurt me," she said quietly. "But it's not just the touch, it's the connection. I felt it too." Lucas blinked, confused. "What do you mean, connection?" Kira took a deep breath, as if weighing whether to reveal something she had kept hidden for a long time. "Our people, we are bound by a curse," she began. "A curse that says we can never touch another being. If we do, it awakens something deep inside us, something powerful that we can't control. But what I didn't know was that a touch would also create a bond, a connection between us." Lucas leaned forward slightly, intrigued. "A bond?" "Yes," Kira nodded. "When our skin touched, it didn't just release the energy. It connected us in a way that goes beyond the physical. I can feel your presence now, even when you're not close to me. It's like we're linked. Our minds, our emotions, they're tied together now. And I can't explain it, but it feels different. It feels right." Lucas processed her words slowly. He had always believed that he was a man of logic and reason, but this was beyond anything he had ever been trained for. The idea of a psychic bond between them was something out of a science fiction story, not something he could have ever imagined experiencing himself. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lucas asked, his voice tinged with both frustration and curiosity. "Why didn't you warn me about the bond?" Kira's gaze softened. "I didn't know it was possible," she admitted. "My people have never allowed contact with others, not like this. We thought that if we avoided touch, we could prevent any kind of connection from forming. But now I don't know what to do. I never expected this to happen." There was a long pause as they both absorbed the reality of their situation. Lucas could feel the strange connection between them, like an invisible thread linking his thoughts to hers. It was subtle, but it was there, tugging at him with every word they spoke. "I don't understand," Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If we're connected, does that mean we can never be apart?" Kira's expression darkened slightly, and she nodded. "I don't know," she said, "but we must be careful. This connection, it could lead to something more dangerous than either of us can predict." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. He hadn't meant to cause trouble, but now, it seemed, he had no choice but to navigate this strange bond between them. Despite the risks, a part of him couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her, the bond that seemed to make them both stronger than before. As the minutes passed, the tension between them shifted. There was no turning back now. Whatever this bond was, it was part of them, and they would have to learn how to live with it, together. The days following their unexpected connection were filled with silence and unease. Lucas and Kira rarely spoke, both of them lost in the complexity of what had happened between them. The bond was still there, always present, a quiet hum in the back of Lucas's mind. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was constant, like a shadow that followed him everywhere. Sometimes he would catch himself glancing at Kira, wondering if she felt the same pull toward him, or if she was just as uncertain about this strange connection. Kira, on the other hand, seemed to be struggling with her own feelings. At first, she had been distant, keeping her emotions guarded and her distance from Lucas. But as the days passed, Lucas could sense a shift in her behavior. She was beginning to open up to him, though only slightly. She still held her secrets close, but the walls she had built around herself were slowly starting to crumble. One evening, as they sat in the quiet of her palace, Lucas decided to break the silence. He couldn't stand the tension any longer, the weight of their unspoken words pressing down on him. "Kira," he began softly, watching her closely. "What happens now? What do we do with this connection between us?" Kira hesitated for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the floor as she considered his question. Finally, she looked up at him, her gaze heavy with the burden of everything she had been carrying. "I don't know," she said quietly. "This bond, it's something my people have never experienced. It's dangerous. We've been taught to keep away from others, to avoid contact at all costs. But now, I don't know what this means for us." Lucas nodded, his mind racing. He could feel the tension between them, the unspoken attraction, but also the fear that came with it. They were walking a fine line, unsure of where it would lead. Every time he moved closer to Kira, the pull between them seemed to grow stronger. It was almost as if they were both afraid to step over the edge, to give in to whatever feelings they were beginning to share. "Can we ever truly be free of it?" Lucas asked. "This connection, can we escape it, or is it something we'll have to live with forever?" Kira looked away, her expression filled with pain. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I've lived my life in isolation, following the rules that my people set. I've never known what it's like to trust someone, to let someone in. But with you, I don't know. There's something about this bond that I can't explain. It feels real, in a way nothing else ever has." The words hung in the air between them, and Lucas could feel his heart begin to race. Was this it? Was this the moment when everything changed? He wanted to reach out, to take her hand and tell her that they could face whatever came next together. But something held him back, something deep inside that told him They were still on the edge of something dangerous. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The room was filled with the sound of their breathing, and Lucas could almost feel Kira's heartbeat, as if their very souls were in sync. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. Finally, Kira spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to be alone anymore, but I'm scared. I'm scared of what this bond means, scared of what it could do to both of us." Lucas looked at her, his expression softening. "We don't have to be alone," he said. "We can figure this out together. We have to trust each other." The words felt heavy in the air, but they also felt right. They were taking a step into the unknown, but for the first time, Lucas felt like they might be able to face whatever came next, together. As Kira slowly nodded, Lucas felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. No matter how difficult this path would be, he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn back now. The bond between them was too strong to ignore. And for better or worse, they would have to find a way to make it work. As the days passed, the strange connection between Lucas and Kira grew stronger. It wasn't just the bond that tied them together, but also the growing understanding they shared. It was a connection that went beyond words, a deep and powerful link that both intrigued and terrified them. But still, the question remained, what would this bond mean for their future? One afternoon, as the two of them walked along the edge of the palace gardens, Kira finally spoke of something she had kept buried for years. They had avoided the topic for as long as possible, but now the time had come. "You need to understand something," Kira said, her voice quiet but firm. She paused, taking a deep breath as she looked out over the beautiful landscape, as if gathering the strength to share her past. "The bond we share, it's not just an accident. It's tied to the history of my people, the history filled with pain and loss." Lucas stopped walking and turned to face her, his curiosity piqued. He had been so focused on the strange connection between them, he hadn't considered the full weight of Kira's past. He knew there was much she hadn't shared, but now he could sense that this was a moment of truth. He was determined to understand. "My people were once very different," Kira continued, her voice laced with sorrow. "Long ago, we were not bound by such rules. We were a powerful and proud species, revered by others for our strength. But we abused that power. We used it to conquer, to control, and we destroyed everything in our path. Our touch, our power, became something feared and hated. It was too much." Lucas felt a cold shiver run through him. He had heard rumors about the power of Kira's people, but he never imagined it could have led to such destruction. He listened carefully, sensing the pain in Kira's voice, the weight of the regret she carried. "One day," Kira continued, "we lost everything. Our planet, our people, our very essence. It all fell apart because of our misuse of power. In the end, we were cursed. Our elders, the last survivors, decided that the only way to prevent further destruction was to create a rule that no one could break, a rule that said no one of our kind could ever touch another being again. It was the only way to keep our power contained, to stop ourselves from destroying everything again." Kira paused, her eyes closed as if reliving the pain of that moment. Lucas could see the weight of the history she carried, a burden that had been passed down through generations. It was clear now why the touch between them was so dangerous. It wasn't just a personal taboo, it was a matter of survival for her people. "That's why I've been isolated," Kira said, her voice soft but resolute. "It was safer for everyone. If I never touched anyone, the curse could never take hold again." Lucas took a step forward, his heart filled with empathy. "But now, with me, it's different, isn't it?" he asked softly. Kira nodded, her eyes meeting his. "Yes. I don't understand why. The bond we share is unlike anything I've ever felt. It's both terrifying and beautiful. But I can't ignore it anymore. It's like I've been waiting for this connection, even though I knew it would bring danger." Lucas reached out slowly, unsure of how she would react. When she didn't pull away, he gently placed a hand on her arm. The energy that surged between them was different this time. Softer, more controlled. It was as if the power inside them was acknowledging their connection, understanding that it wasn't something to fear, but something to embrace. "We don't have to let the past control us," Lucas said, his voice steady. "Together, we can change things. We can make a future where this connection isn't something to fear." Kira's eyes softened, and for the first time, Lucas saw a glimmer of hope in her gaze. "Maybe you're right," she whispered. "Maybe we can change everything." As the sun set behind them, casting long shadows over the garden, Lucas and Kira stood together, facing an uncertain future. But now, for the first time, they faced it together. As the days passed, the strange connection between Lucas and Kira grew stronger. It wasn't just the bond that tied them together, but also the growing understanding they shared. It was a connection that went beyond words, a deep and powerful link that both intrigued and terrified them. But still, the question remained, what would this bond mean for their future? One afternoon, as the two of them walked along the edge of the palace gardens, Kira finally spoke of something she had kept buried for years. They had avoided the topic for as long as possible, but now the time had come. "You need to understand something," Kira said, her voice quiet but firm. She paused, taking a deep breath as she looked out over the beautiful landscape, as if gathering the strength to share her past. "The bond we share, it's not just an accident. It's tied to the history of my people, the history filled with pain and loss." Lucas stopped walking and turned to face her, his curiosity piqued. He had been so focused on the strange connection between them, he hadn't considered the full weight of Kira's past. He knew there was much she hadn't shared, but now he could sense that this was a moment of truth. He was determined to understand. "My people were once very different," Kira continued, her voice laced with sorrow. "Long ago, we were not bound by such rules. We were a powerful and proud species, revered by others for our strength. But we abused that power. We used it to conquer, to control, and we destroyed everything in our path. Our touch, our power, became something feared and hated. It was too much." Lucas felt a cold shiver run through him. He had heard rumors about the power of Kira's people, but he never imagined it could have led to such destruction. He listened carefully, sensing the pain in Kira's voice, the weight of the regret she carried. "One day," Kira continued, "we lost everything. Our planet, our people, our very essence. It all fell apart because of our misuse of power. In the end, we were cursed. Our elders, the last survivors, decided that the only way to prevent further destruction was to create a rule that no one could break. A rule that said no one of our kind could ever touch another being again. It was the only way to keep our power contained, to stop ourselves from destroying everything again." Kira paused, her eyes closed as if reliving the pain of that moment. Lucas could see the weight of the history she carried, a burden that had been passed down through generations. It was clear now why the touch between them was so dangerous. It wasn't just a personal taboo, it was a matter of survival for her people. "That's why I've been isolated," Kira said, her voice soft but resolute. "It was safer for everyone. If I never touched anyone, the curse could never take hold again." Lucas took a step forward, his heart filled with empathy. "But now, with me, it's different, isn't it?" he asked softly. Kira nodded, her eyes meeting his. "Yes. I don't understand why. The bond we share is unlike anything I've ever felt. It's both terrifying and beautiful. But I can't ignore it anymore. It's like I've been waiting for this connection, even though I knew it would bring danger." Lucas reached out slowly, unsure of how she would react. When she didn't pull away, he gently placed a hand on her arm. The energy that surged between them was different this time. Softer, more controlled. It was as if the power inside them was acknowledging their connection, understanding that it wasn't something to fear, but something to embrace. "We don't have to let the past control us," Lucas said, his voice steady. "Together, we can change things. We can make a future where this connection isn't something to fear." Kira's eyes softened, and for the first time, Lucas saw a glimmer of hope in her gaze. "Maybe you're right," she whispered. "Maybe we can change everything." As the sun set behind them, casting long shadows over the garden, Lucas and Kira stood together, facing an uncertain future. But now, for the first time, they faced it together. The days that followed their conversation were filled with both tension and unspoken understanding. The bond between Lucas and Kira had grown stronger, but so had the feelings that neither of them fully understood. They couldn't ignore the pull they felt toward each other, but at the same time, they knew that crossing certain lines could have consequences neither of them was prepared to face. Lucas tried to focus on the task at hand, helping broker peace between the different species of Zorith, but his thoughts kept returning to Kira. Every time they spoke, every glance they shared, the connection between them seemed to grow. It was subtle at first, a soft tug in his chest when she entered the room, but soon it became something more. His heart would race when she was near, and the bond between them would flare with energy, like a spark ready to ignite. Kira, too, struggled with her feelings. She had spent her entire life hiding from others, keeping her emotions locked away. But now, with Lucas, things were different. She felt drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. She would catch herself staring at him, her thoughts tangled in confusion. She knew she should keep her distance, but something inside her told her to trust him, to trust the bond they shared. One evening, as the two of them walked through the palace gardens once again, the air between them was thick with unsaid words. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the landscape. The gentle rustle of the trees was the only sound that filled the silence. "I don't know what to do," Kira said suddenly, breaking the stillness. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I'm afraid of what this connection means, afraid of what I might feel if we get too close." Lucas stopped walking, turning to face her. He could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear that had been there from the start. It was the fear of losing control, of letting something that felt so right slip into something dangerous. "You're not alone in this," Lucas said gently. "I feel it too, Kira. I can't deny it. But we can figure this out. We don't have to be afraid of it." Kira's breath caught in her throat. She had always prided herself on her ability to stay calm, to control her emotions. But with Lucas, it was different. The connection they shared seemed to strip away every barrier, every wall she had built around herself. It was both terrifying and freeing. "I'm not used to this," Kira admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never let anyone get close to me. And now, with you, it feels like I'm losing control of everything." Lucas stepped closer, the space between them growing smaller. "You don't have to lose control," he said softly. "But you also don't have to keep pushing me away. We can take this slow, figure it out together." The air around them seemed to hum with energy, the bond between them thrumming softly in the background. For a moment, everything else disappeared. There was only the two of them, standing together under the moonlight, caught in the quiet intensity of their feelings. Kira took a slow breath, her gaze locked with his. "What if we don't get a chance to figure it out?" she asked, her voice tinged with doubt. "What if this connection is too much, too dangerous?" Lucas smiled softly, his heart steady despite the uncertainty. "Then we'll face it together," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it side by side." As Kira looked into his eyes, something shifted. The fear that had held her back began to loosen, replaced by something warmer, something more familiar. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace. The bond between them was still a mystery, but it no longer felt like a curse. It felt like a promise. And for the first time, Kira allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to make it work. The days that followed were a whirlwind of uncertainty and strange moments. Kira and Lucas had grown closer, their bond deeper, but the fear of what that connection could lead to never quite disappeared. They had talked about their feelings, but neither of them knew how to move forward. The weight of their shared power, their unspoken attraction, and the history of Kira's people kept them on edge. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the palace grounds, a new threat arrived. The quiet peace that had settled over the planet was shattered when a fleet of hostile aliens appeared on the outskirts of the atmosphere, their ships darkening the skies. They were a ruthless species known for their aggression, and they had come to claim Zorith for their own. Kira stood by the window, her gaze fixed on the sky as the first of the enemy ships appeared on the horizon. Lucas joined her, his face hard with determination. He had always known the fragile peace they lived under could shatter at any moment, but he hadn't expected it to happen so soon. "We have to act quickly," Lucas said, his voice steady but urgent. "We can't let them take Zorith." Kira turned to him, her face pale. "They'll destroy everything," she whispered. "My people, they're not ready. We need to act fast, or they'll overwhelm us." Lucas could see the fear in her eyes. She had lived through too many wars and too many betrayals. She had seen the destruction her people were capable of, and she feared that history might repeat itself. "Then we fight back," Lucas said firmly, his voice unwavering. "We can't wait for them to make the first move. We'll show them that Zorith isn't theirs to take." But just as the words left his lips, something unexpected happened. The connection between him and Kira flared with energy, far stronger than it had ever been before. Lucas felt it immediately, a rush of power that nearly knocked him off his feet. It wasn't just the bond between them. It was the power of Kira's people, the power they had both feared and relied on. It surged through both of them, pooling between their hands as they stood together. Kira gasped, clutching his arm as the energy swirled around them. "I can't control it," she said, panic rising in her voice. "The power is too much. It's too strong." Lucas held onto her tightly, feeling the overwhelming energy that was pulsing between them. "We can do this," he said, though even he wasn't sure how. The surge of power felt like a tidal wave, and he could feel Kira's fear growing, just as his own fear had taken root in his chest. The bond between them was no longer just a connection. It was a weapon, a force of nature that was ready to be unleashed. Kira's eyes widened in shock. "No, this isn't how it's supposed to happen," she cried. "We can't." Before she could finish, the energy between them broke free, sending a shockwave of raw power across the room. The walls of the palace trembled, and the ground beneath them shook. The force of it was so strong that it felt as if the entire planet might tear itself apart. For a moment, Lucas and Kira were both caught in the center of the storm, overwhelmed by the power that coursed through them. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the energy faded. The room fell silent once more. Lucas stood, breathing heavily, his heart racing. He had never felt anything like that before, and neither had Kira. The connection they shared had always been something to fear, something they could never control. But now they had both felt the power of it firsthand. It was a power that could save their world, or destroy it. Kira looked at him, her face pale with shock. "What have we done?" she whispered. "I never wanted this." Lucas took a step toward her, his hand reaching out. "We didn't do this, Kira. This is the power of your people. And maybe it's time we use it to protect everything we care about." She hesitated, but then, slowly, she took his hand. In that moment, despite the fear and uncertainty that still surrounded them, they knew one thing for sure. They couldn't turn back now. They had unleashed something powerful, something dangerous, but they would face it together, whatever the cost. The enemy fleet loomed above Zorith, its dark ships casting long shadows over the planet. The peace that had held for so long was now nothing but a memory, shattered by the arrival of invaders who cared nothing for diplomacy. Kira and Lucas stood side by side, their hands still trembling from the energy that had surged through them. Neither of them fully understood what had just happened, but they both knew one thing. The power between them had changed everything. The strange connection they shared wasn't just some strange bond. It was something much more. It was a force, a power that could protect or destroy. And now they had to learn how to control it. If they didn't, the galaxy itself could suffer. "We need to do something," Lucas said, his voice firm but filled with concern. "They're going to attack. We can't just stand here and let them destroy everything." Kira nodded, her face a mixture of determination and fear. "I know, but we need to control this power. If we can't, we might make things worse." Lucas glanced at her, his heart heavy with the weight of their situation. The power they had unleashed was unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was as if they were connected to the very core of the universe itself. And though it scared him, it also gave him hope. Maybe this was their chance to stop the invaders. Maybe this was the key to saving Zorith. "We'll figure it out," Lucas said, stepping closer to Kira. "Together." Kira took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The connection between them still pulsed with energy, but now it felt more controlled, more focused. She reached out and touched Lucas's arm, the bond between them flaring to life once again. This time, though, it wasn't out of panic, it was out of purpose. "I don't know if I can control it," Kira whispered, her voice full of doubt. "But I have to try." Lucas placed his hand on hers, offering her his support. "You're not alone in this, Kira. We'll face it together, whatever comes." As their hands met, the energy between them swirled and grew stronger. But this time, they felt a sense of direction. The power was no longer chaotic, it was focused. It was as if the very fabric of the universe was responding to their combined will. For the first time, Kira didn't feel like the weight of her people's curse was something to fear. Instead, it felt like a strength, a force that could be harnessed for something greater. Together, they stepped toward the command center, where they would face the enemy fleet head-on. The palace was alive with activity as soldiers prepared for battle, but there was a calm certainty in the air that had not been there before. The bond between Lucas and Kira had given them both a new sense of purpose. They were no longer just two people trying to survive. They were part of something much bigger. The enemy ships were already descending, ready to bombard the planet. But Kira and Lucas stood firm. They could feel the power coursing through them, and though it was still foreign and unpredictable, they knew they had the strength to stop the invasion. It wasn't just about power, it was about trust. Trust in each other and in the connection they shared. As they stood together, hand in hand, they both knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. But they also knew that, together, they could change the fate of the galaxy. The power they had unlocked was just the beginning. The air was thick with tension as Kira and Lucas stood before the enemy fleet, their combined power humming softly between them. The sky above was dark with the shadow of countless ships, their engines glowing like distant stars. The invaders had come with one goal, to conquer Zorith. But now, for the first time, the defenders of this world were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting with a power they barely understood. Lucas looked at Kira, his heart heavy with the weight of the choice they were about to make. He knew they couldn't back down now. The bond between them had changed everything. It had given them the strength to stand up to the enemy. But it also carried a heavy responsibility. What would they become if they used this power? Would they be the saviors of Zorith, or would they become something far more dangerous? "I don't know if I can control it," Kira whispered, her voice full of doubt. "This power, it's not just mine anymore. It's ours, and I'm afraid of what might happen if we lose control." Lucas reached out and took her hand, offering her the reassurance she needed. "We've already controlled it once. We can do it again. We just have to trust each other." Kira met his gaze, searching for the same certainty that he had in his eyes. She had spent her whole life fearing the power that flowed through her people's bloodline. But now she didn't feel afraid of it anymore. With Lucas by her side, the power didn't seem like a curse. It seemed like a chance to change everything. "But what if we can't control it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if this power is too much for us to handle?" Lucas's expression softened. He had asked himself the same questions, but in his heart, he knew they had no other choice. "We can't let fear control us, Kira," he said gently. "We've been given this power for a reason. Together, we can make the right choice." They both turned toward the fleet in the sky, the ships looming closer, their weapons ready to strike. The fate of Zorith hung in the balance, and there was no time left for doubt. The moment had come to make their stand. As the enemy ships fired their first round of attacks, Lucas and Kira stood firm, their hands still joined. The burst of energy erupted from them, a wave of power that collided with the incoming fire. The force of their combined power was enough to stop the missiles midair, sending them spiraling away from the planet. But it wasn't enough to stop the enemy completely. The invaders were relentless, their forces pushing forward. Kira could feel the strain on her body as she tried to maintain the power, the energy swirling around her like a storm. It was too much. She couldn't hold it for long. "We need to make a choice," Kira said urgently. "We can't hold back any longer. If we want to protect this world, we have to give everything we have." Lucas squeezed her hand. "Then we give everything. Together." With a deep breath, they both stepped forward, the power between them growing stronger with each passing second. It wasn't just about stopping the enemy. It was about making a choice to protect the future, no matter the cost. The energy that surged through them now was like nothing they had ever experienced before, a force that felt as though it could reshape the very fabric of the universe. "Let's finish this," Lucas said, his voice filled with determination. With one final surge of energy, they unleashed the full force of their combined power. A blinding light erupted from their joined hands, a beam of pure energy that struck the heart of the enemy fleet. The invaders' ships began to disintegrate in the blink of an eye, their forces scattered and destroyed. For a moment, there was silence. The battle was over. As the last of the enemy ships fell from the sky, Kira and Lucas stood together, breathing heavily, their hands still clasped tightly. The bond between them had done what no one else could, what no army could. It had saved Zorith. But as the dust settled, they both knew that the true choice had not been about defeating the enemy. It had been about choosing to trust each other, choosing to face the unknown together. And whatever came next, they knew they would face it side by side. The battle was over. The enemy fleet had been destroyed in a flash of blinding light, and the skies above Zorith were once again clear. The planet had been saved, but the cost of that victory weighed heavily on Kira and Lucas. They stood in the aftermath, still holding hands, their hearts pounding from the surge of power that had just been unleashed. The world around them was quiet now, the echoes of war fading into the distance. Kira's breath came in shallow gasps as she looked at the wreckage of the enemy ships, scattered across the atmosphere. She had never imagined that she would be part of something so massive. For most of her life, she had feared the power that lay within her, the power that her people had kept hidden for centuries. But now, after everything that had happened, she realized that power wasn't a curse, it was a gift. And it was a gift she didn't have to carry alone. Lucas looked at her, his expression soft with relief and something more. "We did it," he said, his voice still filled with disbelief. "We saved Zorith." Kira nodded slowly, but her gaze never left the horizon. "We didn't just save Zorith," she said quietly. "We changed everything. This connection, this power, it's not just for destruction. It's for something more. It's for rebuilding, for healing." Lucas stepped closer to her, his hand still firmly holding hers. "I agree," he said. "But now we have to figure out how to move forward. We've opened a door to something none of us were ready for." For the first time in a long while, Kira smiled. A genuine, soft smile that reached her eyes. "Maybe we don't need to be ready. Maybe we just need to take it one step at a time." They stood there for a long moment, letting the stillness of the moment settle around them. The galaxy had been changed. The power they had unlocked was something that could either save or destroy everything. But for now, it felt like a promise, one that they would keep together. "Where do we go from here?" Lucas asked, breaking the silence. Kira turned her gaze to him, her eyes full of determination. "We rebuild," she said simply. "We rebuild Zorith, and we rebuild the trust between our people. We show them that we can use this power to unite, not divide. And maybe, just maybe, we can show the galaxy that we don't have to fear each other." Lucas nodded, his heart swelling with hope. "And what about us?" he asked. "What do we do with this?" Kira's expression softened, and for a brief moment, the bond between them flared, gentle and strong. "We take it one step at a time," she said again. "We trust each other. We move forward together." As they stood hand in hand, looking out over the peaceful world they had saved, Kira and Lucas knew that their journey was far from over. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges they couldn't yet see, but for the first time, they felt ready. Together, they had unlocked a new kind of power, one that could change the course of their world, and perhaps even the galaxy. And whatever came next, they would face it side by side.